hey, you better be able to run the football and you better be able to be successful at it. And, we used our tight ends quite a bit, the deep play action, things in that nature. And so it was really, I've never really sat here and said, this is the offense we're going to be. This is the defense we're going to be no matter what. It's what can our guys do and do well. And you know what? Sometimes we fail at that. Sometimes we're not what we think we are, or what we want to be, but it's what can our guys do well.
Welcome to Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. Each episode pulls back the curtain on the coaching profession, spotlighting voices from every level of the game and offering lessons and insights for your own path. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
Follow Inside the Headset on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. We drop new episodes each week, so hit that follow button and never miss a moment. Now, let's get inside the headset.
Coach, what's happening, man? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. It's always great to catch up with you. You former 35 under 35 guy, I think, 2020? I think that class.
2020. I was right before the world changed.
That's right. Yeah. That was pretty normal. I guess 21 was the one that our convention was a little off, the virtual one. But anyways, man, been a heck of a just heck of an AFCA member, heck of a coach, just somebody I can lean on, speak and do all those things for us, man. So I appreciate you taking the time as a head ball coach to come talk a little career and all that kind of stuff with me, man. So let's go ahead and hop into this thing. The first question we always ask is, when did you know you wanted to be a part of this great profession?
I always knew. Sports was a part of my life growing up. I played, baseball, basketball, football. In high school, it went to football and baseball, just because of the overlap with basketball, and realized that 6'3", I wasn't good enough to play the outside and wasn't big enough to play the inside. So football and baseball in high school were big for me, and I knew I wanted to stay involved some way or another. And then when I got to college, when I went to the University of Wyoming and seeing kind of the recruiting process, what they did every day. I heard Coach Brian Applewhite tell me, he said, everybody complains about Mondays going back to work, but Mondays is fun for us. That's game planning. That's breaking down film. It's getting ready for the next game. And so I knew I wanted to stay involved some way or another. This game's given me so much. And so that was kind of in college when I was like, man, I really want to try to see if I can do this. I love the change of the seasons of what happens, but I also love the, giving back. And I think every coach gets involved to give back to the kids or young adults, if you're in college and things like that. So I would say right around, freshman year of college when I wanted to really do this.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, speaking of freshman year of college, freshman All Mountain West team while you were at Wyoming, transfer to Indiana State, spend a little time there, and then finish your career in a pretty dang good one at Morningside. Threw for 3,800 yards, 36 touchdowns. I didn't pull up the interceptions. I don't know how many you threw of those, but had a heck of a playing career.
There was a couple. There was a few. There always is.
Yeah, man. But anyways, had a great career there. And anytime I kind of see a coach that's transferred a little bit, and I'm a coach, well, not anymore, but that I transferred. I went to Army. I transferred to Baylor University, finished my time there. I always think it's interesting, especially right now as times are changing with the term transfer portal. First and foremost, that you've always been able to transfer. It's not a new phenomena. And we were kind of talking about our reasons or whatnot, and and oftentimes there's valid reasons. And anyways, I just love to talk a little bit about that as somebody that had transferred a couple times, and myself that's transferred.
Yeah, so I was brought in by the staff at Wyoming, was there 2.5 years. The administration made a change for the head coach, and that was when I really there's some business aspects to this. And they made a change, and a new staff came in, and I just didn't fit their fit their offensive schemes, and rightfully so. At 19 years old, 20 years old, I probably didn't understand it quite a bit. But they brought in, hey, this is what we want to do. This is who we're going to be. And I wasn't that. I wasn't that at the quarterback position. And now I understand it. Now I understand it from a coaching role as well. And so I transferred. Now back then it was, you had to transfer down a level,
right,
to play right away. And I wanted to play. I didn't really like sitting. I wanted to play. I thought I could play at whatever level that was. It wasn't just D1 or bust for me. And so I transferred to Indiana State and loved my time there. Was there a year and got beat out by a guy the next year that came in, and ended up being a phenomenal quarterback for them. And so again, I was at that spot where it was like, man, I really want to be under center again. I really want to play. And so then found a home at Morningside College, which is a storied program in the NAI with Steve Ryan as the head coach, and they've won multiple national championships and gone far. And so, each level I was at and each school I really took from, the coaches I played for or got to be around and things like that, and tried to gel that into who I am today and what I stand for today.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, you mentioned your freshman year, you kind of knew you might have an itch for being a coach. How did you go about kind of securing that first opportunity as a GA at William Penn University?
When I was at Morningside, that was Coach Ryan Norris, who's actually at Montana Western in our conference right now while I'm at Rocky. I went into him and I said, Coach, I didn't know. I didn't know Football Scoop was a thing. I didn't know how to really apply for jobs or what it was. And so he kind of talked to me about, hey, maybe coaches, or getting them and just understanding, being around people and talking to people. And I didn't even know the convention was a thing. But, I was very raw into the ordeal. And so I kind of found what Football Scoop was. And I think I applied for 100 jobs, for GA jobs, for anything, anywhere across the country.
Right.
And was very fortunate to be hired by Todd Hafner at William Penn University in Oskaloosa, Iowa. What a phenomenal man that I got to work for and work with every day, and really gave me a great experience in my first, couple years of coaching.
And typically when you step off the field, you step into that office, it is kind of mind blowing, because you think ball, you think hard work, you think all these things, and then obviously you go GA and go lock yourself in a dark room and break down 6 games, go paint the field, and go change laundry, and go do the laundry, especially some of those divisional spots where you got to be a jack of all trades and wear a lot of hats. Just talk about that transition experience for you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was I had a head coach and an offensive coordinator at that time that really told me, hey, here's your day-to-day jobs. Here's what we're looking for. I was a pro-style quarterback that went to coach the receivers in a triple option offense. And so when I went through that, I'm hearing, oh, they don't have enough guys to this side. I'm used to inside zone. I'm not used to reading the end man on line scrimmage or the 3 technique or things like that. So it was great for me. It opened up another side of football. But I think the hardest thing for me was making sure I could separate myself from being a 22, 23-year-old, where maybe some players were, 6 months prior, I would have been hanging out with them.
Absolutely.
And so that was tough. But again, I worked for a phenomenal guy that really allowed me to make mistakes, but learn from them.
Yeah.
Taught me a lot of great things. But I took stuff from everybody that I was around, from Joe Glenn to Brian Applewhite to different guys, Steve Ryan, and how they did things, and really just tried to, mold that and take what I could use to help young men.
Absolutely. I'm happy you mentioned that, because that was something I was going to ask you. Obviously, being able to go to, play at 3 different programs, you do get to see success or failures. They don't all look the same. And every locker room is not created equal. Every facility is not created equal. It's all these different things. And so how advantageous was that for you, I guess, walking in? I mean, because I remember my first job, and kind of like you mentioned, I didn't play in the pro style, but I played in the style of offense, and I came in and we didn't do that in my first coaching job. And I'm like, well, why don't we do this? And you just realize there's different ways to skin a cat, but you kind of already been exposed to that. How advantageous was that for you to kind of have some exposure to different things?
Yeah, it was good. I think the understanding of, concepts of how we did it at Wyoming to to Indiana State, to Morningside. I mean, Morningside, we were very up tempo, quick hitting, big play action shot team. Where at, Wyoming, we were, as when I was the starter as a 19-year-old under center, it was, hey, throw it when we need to and get us in the right run play. And then with Indiana State in between that. So I think the biggest thing for me going to an option offense, one, I learned a lot about football and numbers, and, they don't have the handoff key to the pitch key to the quarterback, who's the quarterback player. And so that's carried on with me quite a bit. But again, it was just separating yourself and understanding that, this is what a coach is. This is how it's done. And I was surrounded at William Penn by a lot of true professionals, that are phenomenal, coaches and really coaches of the coaches, as well, and really helping us out. And that was huge for me. You sometimes hear these horror stories from guys of when they went somewhere or things like that. But, for me, I had a great experience and I knew I wanted to be a head coach. When I got into coaching, I knew I wanted to be a head coach one day. And so I just tried to surround myself of knowing whether it was the budget, how scholarships work, to travel, to, being in team meetings and listening to how the head coach presented himself, and just really tried to be a sponge, to be honest with you. Tried to soak it in and go from there.
You said something that I typically ask on a podcast when a guy returns back to the exact same place he played at, relatively quickly. But this is a real deal. One of my best friends in the profession, one of my best friends in real life, he got himself in a little trouble with the age thing. It just been a young GA and hanging out with players. And you just talked about professional coaches that you were around. How I guess you're sitting in that head seat and you hire some of these young coaches. What advice do you got for young guys in regards to just maintaining that professionalism, and keeping themselves out of those type of issues?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, what I do is I always sit down, day one, day two with a new hire, especially a young guy, and, kind of like that freshman coming in. Hey, here's the standards, here's the expectations. Make sure, what are your goals and aspirations? Yeah. Okay, I want to be a coordinator. I want to be a head coach. Okay, here's where I screwed up. I always start with that first. Here's where I screwed up. Here's what I did wrong. Learn from that. Don't make that mistake. And, again, it's just having those standards of, this is how we carry ourselves. This is the language we use around, young people or women and children, or, people say all the time don't dress for the job you have now, dress for the one you want. I agree with that a little bit, but I also want you to be yourself. I don't want you to change, but I want you to fine tune and make sure you understand, hey, this is how we're gonna do things. And so I think that's the biggest thing, and it's worked out really well for us to be able to sit down with younger coaches or guys maybe in their first year or second year, of how we expect things to be done.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So your next job was at University of South Dakota, and typically I kind of asked how that came about, and I'm going to get to that. But I do know that it was under Joe Glenn. He was the head coach at that time, and I think one of the cool parts, of my job is oftentimes I get people to hit me up that are just got fired or maybe trying to enter the profession. They ask for advice, and one of the things I say is tap into the current network that you have. You just got through playing, you played at this university. You need to hit all 15 coaches that you touched base with and hit them up and let them know that you're trying to get into the profession. And advantageous for me, playing at Army, I coached for Todd Berry, then I transferred to Baylor, and I actually had the opportunity to coach for Guy Morris, who was the head coach at Baylor. And so this was you tapping into your first head coach. How did y'all kind of rekindle that relationship, and you tap into that network that you had to get started there?
Well, the biggest thing was I never lost contact with him when I stopped playing for him. He was the guy that gave me an opportunity, and it wasn't just him on that staff. At Wyoming, I talked to Bob Cole, our offensive coordinator, Brian Applewhite, the running backs coach, Chad Germer, and just multiple, Mike Bresky. And so, seeing Coach Glenn get back into the coaching at, the ranks at South Dakota, I had always just kind of said, Coach, if there's anything open, I'd love to work for you. I knew my GA spot was kind of coming to an end. Yeah. And so, the guy I worked for at William Penn was like, hey, about 3-4 months out, really reach out to guys that and try to get that job set up. Yeah. So you're not kind of left out in the rain, to be honest with you. And so, but I didn't really keep those relationships for the job aspect. I kept those relationships because they were meaningful to me, and they were guys that, worked their tails off, and provided for me and were great mentors. And so, and then it just so happened that, hey, I've got a spot open. And so I went up there for a little bit and then went back to William Penn as the offensive coordinator. So in a short time. So it's just funny in coaching how it all circles around. But I would tell people all the time, reach out to the guys that were good to you, reach out to the guys that were beneficial to you, not for a coaching job, but just to keep those relationships, because you never know when you're going to have that low moment where you need a phone call, where you need to reach out and say, hey, coach, how would you handle this? And so just reach out to them to stay involved. And I think that's important in the coaching profession, not just reaching out when you need something or looking for something.
No, that's huge. And I was going to point out that you threw that in there as you were talking about that. And I think that's probably more key than a lot of things we even talk about today is, our staff got let go and all of a sudden I'm calling everybody, but you hadn't heard from me in, a couple of years. Sometimes that's tough. But when you're able to maintain those, genuine relationships, I do think it makes it a lot easier. And when you get to the point where, hey man, how you handle this on third down? What are you guys doing with this on third down? And guys are willing to help when you're building up those genuine relationships. Now, you obviously had the relationship with Coach Glenn from a recruiting aspect in that 1 year plan for him. What was it like, kind of working for him? And you're still looking at him as coach, not necessarily a coworker.
Yeah, I think he didn't change who he was, and I respected that. He was just a genuine person that cared about you, cared about your family, remembered everything. I mean, I could talk to him today and he would ask me by name how my brothers are doing, how this is going on. And just you knew the genuine side of things was there. As a coach, it was very much, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. I learned it was more from him of, hey, let's get all the facts if something happens. Let's not just overreact on one side. Let's look at everything as a whole. And I really took that from him of, there were some things maybe that happened and it was like, oh, we got to do X, Y, and Z. I'm thinking in my mind as a 20-year-old, like, oh, I got this figured out. Let's do this.
Yeah, right.
Where he was like, hey, let's take the facts in. Let's not overreact. Let's do what's best for the young man, for the team, for the school, things in that nature, game plan, whatever it was. But I really, really loved being around him and learned a lot from him and a lot of other guys on that staff at South Dakota.
Yeah. And, you have that 1 year, and then, as you mentioned, you returned back in 2014 to William Penn as the offensive coordinator. What are you, 24 at this point in time, 25?
I think so, 24, 25, yeah.
Which, now sitting in the seat right now, I don't know exactly how old you are, but 39, 40 years old. I mean, how much football have you learned in those years since 24 to now? Yeah. How did you prepare yourself to be an OC from an interview standpoint, from, what you were able to kind of take away from South Dakota, your playing experience, and how were you able to go land that job?
Well, the biggest thing is I had a relationship, and I felt like, I did a good job while I was at William Penn for Todd Hafner there. And he felt comfortable to call me back and say, hey, let's, your first year, second year, whatever it may be, let's not put a time frame on it, but let's do this together. And they were still, option based at William Penn, which, I was all for because we had a lot of success there. And, but he felt comfortable and felt like I did a good enough job while I was there as GA, to bring me back. And so I'm very fortunate for that. But I think the biggest thing was, what I learned was, man, every play is a great play, but how many plays can you have to really go win a football game? Ken Niumatalolo said, if it takes you 12, 14 hours to come up with a game plan and you got to teach it to your guys and master it in 6, 7, 8 hours, what are you doing? So I really kind of took a little bit of that and said, well, that's pretty true. They're still going to class. They still got girlfriend issues or family issues or personal issues, whatever it may be. That you're dealing with these 18 to 22-year-olds. And so, but I think being organized was big for me. I wanted to make the head coach's job as easy as possible and take whatever I could off of him. But as being an OC, I really I knew I still wanted to be a head coach. So I wanted to be in charge or have my hands in everything. Yeah. And so it was tough. It was long days. It was a lot of stuff. There was not a lot of downtime, but I think it really helped me out to prepare myself for the job I have now.
Over my years as a coach, I saw all kinds of GAs come in, and most of them did a good job, but they all did a good job in their own way. Some guys did a good job, and they weren't totally invested in learning the football aspect. They were just totally invested in doing a good job for the staff, making sure we had everything that we needed. Maybe necessarily didn't know the scheme as well. During that GA experience, I'm assuming you also had, a full-time position. And so you had to be heavily involved with what was going on offensively. My question to you is, how did you learn QB play, the O-line play, and all that stuff in such a short frame in an offense that you weren't very familiar with?
I think the biggest thing was just listening, again, like you said, it wasn't just, hey, I'm typing the plays into Google Drive or our Excel sheet or whatever. It was not being afraid to ask questions. Like, hey, why are our hand placement there? Why are we cutting this guy? Why are we running this play? What do we want to try to do? I asked a lot of questions. And because I wanted to learn it, I didn't want to leave that meeting not knowing 100%, not only what my guys did, but what other guys did. And then I cold called. I was the receivers coach my first 2 years, and we were bad at blocking on the edge in the triple option offense. And so after my first season, I called Navy and Army, and I said, how do you guys do it? And I was very fortunate. They called me back. They said, here's the drills we work on. Here's some film. And so that's what I did. I didn't want to accept just, well, we'll figure it out or do those things. I tried to do everything I possibly could to make our guys better. And I think that kind of earned the respect of the guys, the coaches I worked with. But I asked a lot of questions to make sure I knew exactly what was going on, because I was trying to prepare myself for the next job.
Yeah. It's pretty cool is sitting here listening to you answer these questions and imagining myself being on that staff. Like that would impress me, because it would be so easy as a young coach. Oh, our guys just aren't good enough. They just can't get it. We got to get some better guys. Which, how many times have you heard that before, right? I mean, that's kind of an easy thing to say, but instead you're proactive and go and reach out to these programs and you're asking questions. I mean, that's big time, man. That's big time. Now, you mentioned something else, and your next 4 years at this point in time, 2014 all the way to 17, you're an offensive coordinator. When did you learn this about the Waffle House menu of play calls? That sometimes less is more. When did you learn that aspect?
Honestly, it was COVID.
Okay.
When I was the OC at Rocky for 2 years, it was hey, by formation, by down and distance, by this, by that, and you look at yourself and you're like, man, we're still running the same 25 plays. And man, we ran this play 2 times in practice, but we ran it 5 times in a game because that's what you're comfortable with as a coach. And so really during COVID, to be honest with you, I was fortunate enough, as it was right right after our first year here at Rocky, we had a connection at USC. And so went out to USC literally 2 days before COVID hit. we almost got stranded out in Southern California. And so, but just talking with Graham Harrell and his offensive staff, and hearing, how Mike Leach did it, how Lincoln Riley did it, how these guys did it. And then when we got back for COVID, we had to practice our 1 through 4 group. We didn't know who was going to be able to play. And so then it was like, hey, let's get really good at our base stuff.
Yeah.
Let's have our tweaks on third downs, our red zone, things of that nature. But then it just became a piece of paper, the piece of paper that's folded. And I just think kids want to run what they're comfortable and confident in. And it starts with your quarterback and your offensive line. And so, we just didn't know at that time. We may have this freshman who knows 6 plays, and then this senior, we don't know who's going to be playing for us. So I would say kind of that menu shrunk down a lot during COVID. And, some people have big menus and they're really good at it. Some people have small menus and they're really good at it. Paul Johnson didn't have a play call sheet at Georgia Tech. He went off of what he did. And so I think taking that stuff in the triple option offense of going, hey, here's our 12 to 14 plays, and we're going to be really good at it.
Yeah.
I think in the pro style of spread, you've got to do a little bit more. Maybe it's with motions or shifts and adjustments and tempo or things in that nature. But, get really good at what your kids do, because it doesn't matter what we know.
Yeah.
It matters what our kids know and can execute at the end of the day.
Absolutely. You made a heck of a point right there, bringing up Paul Johnson and, going around to these different spots and seeing how different guys do it. I remember kind of my last years in the profession, Lincoln Riley was doing something super cool with practice. And it was a young coach like, we need to do this. And it's like, hey, every coach can't be like Paul Johnson. Every coach can't walk out there and just call it off the rip. Every coach can't be Mike Leach with a little notepad and make the notes. Everybody kind of has to fit what your kids are able to do in your personality as a play caller. I say this is kind of a funny story, but this was a learning lesson for me. I remember sitting on a bus after a game we lost, and it was a game we should have won. And I'm sitting behind the head coach and the offensive coordinator, and the head coach is pissed, and he's doing all his math with our practice sheets and the call sheet, and he turns to the OC and he says, "We practiced, 26 counter. We got 14 reps in practice this week. We called it once in a game. We didn't practice this X amount of times, but we called it 14 times in a game. And it was kind of one of those eye-opening moments of like, you better put some structure to that. You better have an idea, what your kids are able to do. And it sounds like you were able to kind of discover that while you were, during that COVID time. During those, I kind of lumped these 2 years together. Well, I won't do that. So at William Penn, you're running the triple, have some success, take a job at Rocky Mountain in 2016, 2017 as offensive coordinator. What did you do there offensively?
We were pro style spread. I mean, we were in shotgun. We were 11 personnel, some 12 personnel. That was an eye opener up here coming to the frontier of saying, hey, you better be able to run the football and you better be able to be successful at it. And, we used our tight ends quite a bit, the deep play action, things in that nature. And so it was really, I've never really sat here and said, this is the offense we're going to be. This is the defense we're going to be no matter what. It's what can our guys do and do well. Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes we fail at that. Sometimes we're not what we think we are or what we want to be, but it's what can our guys do well. Now there's certain things, that, hey, we need the quarterback to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. We need to be able to have some guys stretch the field or, tackle well on defense. And I mean, there's always your base standard. We're not just sitting here throwing the playbook out every year, but yeah. I think it may sit there and go, hey, our O-line's really good at outside zone this year. Okay, let's run outside zone. Let's get really good at that. And that's where the coaching part of it is. I never liked when coaches were, this is what we're going to do no matter what. Mm-hmm. You better figure it out. Because we're still dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds where it's like, man, this kid can really do this. And being at the NAI level, those change from year to year. Yeah. You may not have the 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" offensive linemen that are 320 pounds and can just be people movers. You may have a quarterback one year that's a dynamic runner, and the next guy behind him is a pocket passer. Yeah. So you have to adapt. And I think that's what's huge about coaching is making sure, I think the best coaches are the ones that can adapt and find out this is what our guys are good at in the spring, the summer, and really kind of put their tweaks and their molds on it for fall.
And what the way you phrase that kind of leads me to a question in your chair that you're sitting in now as the head ball coach. How is that kind of having that philosophy? How has that impacted recruiting? I've seen some staffs that legit say, hey man, I want the best player. I don't care how tall, how short, whatever. I just want the best player. And then you have some guys that say, we're looking for a 6'1" to 6'3" pocket pass to right-handed quarterback, and they're looking for something very specific. Being flexible, how does that change your recruiting process?
So I think the biggest thing is I tell, our offensive coordinator, our defensive coordinator, hey, these are the things that I want to be with a very base. A lot of it's going to start with what kind of a person is that young man? Yep. Off the field, on the field, how much does he love football? How does he handle adversity? How does he, those things. Then with each position group, I sit down with the coordinators and that position coach and say, okay, what are things that we have to be able to run? Do we have to be able to throw four verts? Okay. Here's what we need to look for on tape. Here's what we need to talk to them about. When it comes to skill guys, we've got in our running back room a mixture of the bowling ball type guys to the scat backs.
Yeah.
And receivers, it's more of the, hey, can this guy make plays? What can he do with the ball in open space? Defensively, they've got to be good tacklers. They've got to be physical, those aspects. And then we kind of look at, all right, let's get the best ones we can here. So it's a mixed bag of both things. Yeah. But yeah, I think you're always going to have your standards and your expectations of things. But, who doesn't want the 6'4" quarterback that can run and throw?
Yes.
Who doesn't want the, we could look for those, but if that's all we're settling for, then I've seen a lot of good players at every level that were maybe a 6'2" lineman, 285 pounds, that were really good.
Yeah.
Or, this position or that position. And so we're going to have our set standards and expectations of what we look for. But it's still going to be, man, this kid, for whatever reason, coach, he can just make plays. Or, man, he's a little smaller, but God dang, he's always in the right spot on defense, or eyes are good, or technique is good. And so that's what I give, lower level coaches a lot of credit for is, I remember at Wyoming and playing against Tennessee where it was cover 1 on every play except for third down where it was cover 2. And you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that. We're going to sit there and go, hey, this week we're really good at this, or they've got some matchups where we need to change. And that's where I think, your NAI, your D2, your D3 coaches do a phenomenal job of understanding, adapt, and do what's best for the guys and to get a win on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah. 3rd and 1. I wish we all could just run power for the first down, right?
Yeah.
It's easier for some than others.
I'd love to put 2 tight ends in the game and just wash them down and run the quarterback and do this and that, but
yeah. Sometimes you got to get out.
Sometimes that's not the reality.
That's right. Well, kind of getting back on track here. Just real quick, what was the difference in your approach in regards to just overall philosophy, taking that first offensive coordinator job and then 2 years later taking that next offensive coordinator job? Did you approach it any differently, knowing what you knew from the first round?
Yeah, I think the biggest adjustment for us was the guy I worked for here. I wasn't going to run the triple option that I learned with William Penn and did that, but we took some things from it, like it became the zone read triple option, right? Everybody knows that, and so the biggest thing for me was again kind of looking at, and this is where I failed my first year at Rocky as the OC, was I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then after the season, it's like, man, we weren't very good at the things that we said we needed to be good at. And so it was more than looking at, okay, here's what we have coming back. Here's the pieces we need to add, and really figuring out what we were going to be good at, not telling them what we were going to be good at.
Now, after those years as offensive coordinator, you and been at Rocky Mountain, you take a year in 2018. You head over to Southwestern Oklahoma State as the offensive line assistant head coach. What was that brief stop about, kind of in the middle of your Rocky Mountain run here?
Yeah, so when I was at Rocky, I worked for Jason Petrino, who was on staff at Wyoming and then was the defensive coordinator at South Dakota. And honestly, and it was nobody's fault or nobody's anything, but I wanted to be a head coach. And when I came to work for him at Rocky, I assumed, I thought that he was going to be here for a long time. He'd done a great job, and his, family was from here. And so I was like, man, I think, and it was just me saying it. I was like, man, I think he's going to be here for a while. And so had the opportunity to go work for Chet Publish and get that call a little bit of like, man, I'd always been far away from home, at Wyoming. I'm from Oklahoma, but being at Wyoming, then Indiana State, and then in Iowa and South Dakota. And so I was like, man, I'm going to be an hour away from home. And, the GAC, a good league. And so I was like, this is kind of a new opportunity. I'd never coached a line before. And so got that aspect of it and enjoyed my time there. And then, I left in April from Rocky, and I think in December get a call from the AD and seeing if I'm interested in the head coaching job here. And so it was fast. It happened really quick, and but I knew, on the Rocky team, I think I knew everybody but maybe 4 or 5 players because I was still part of that recruiting class the previous year. So. It was nothing bad or anything like that. It was just kind of one of those where I was like, hey, what's kind of the next step for me? And I thought, again, Jason was going to be here for a while, and things change and happen by no one's fault or anything like that. And so very fortunate to get a call back here and to be the head coach since middle of December of 2018.
That's awesome. Now, where were you from in Oklahoma?
Lawton, Fort Sill.
Lawton. Okay, sweet.
So Southwest Oklahoma. Yep.
I gotcha. Okay, so yeah, I didn't realize that part of it. So opportunity to get a little closer to home, all that good stuff. Now, it's a tough question for you to answer probably, but because it's nothing but a guess. Do you think if you stayed on that staff, that year, so you didn't shoot down to Southwest Oklahoma, would you have got to, would you have been in a position to get the job? I know that's not, it's nothing but a guess, but did you think moving away helped at all?
I don't think so, honestly. I don't think it was anything that, I thought I had a great relationship with the AD here. Obviously, it was I looked at it as the same thing that happened with me at William Penn when I GA'd there, went to South Dakota and came back.
Yeah.
Obviously I must have done a good job with the higher ups, as I like to call them, and they felt comfortable with me and knowing the kids and things like that. I don't think moving to, a D2 school, they called and said that, man, we got to get that guy because he went there, things like that. But I think that's why I think it's all about what you do while you're there.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I tell any coach or young coaches or older coaches is, this is whatever school you think is the greatest in the country. That has to be what you believe in wherever you're at. And you have to do a great job there, so that way you leave it better than you found it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the frustrating part sometimes with me as a head coach. When I see guys, I hear the stories from other coaches I work with or know of, like, man, this guy was searching for jobs 24/7 and left the job, the wrong way. I think I've left jobs the right way, and that's why they've had me back. And that's my biggest thing to young coaches is, if you believe Alabama is the greatest program in the world, or North Dakota State, or Montana State, or Rocky Mountain College, wherever you're at, you have to treat it like that. And you have to give all in, because that's where you are. And we can tell, you hear people telling recruits or players all the time, well, the grass isn't always greener somewhere else. Well, we need to take that as coaches too, and understand that we've got to build it to the best of our ability wherever we're at. And when that time comes, when we need to leave, you can look yourself in the mirror and say that, hey, I did leave that place better than I found it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned one thing that I think is, I honestly do think it's difficult for people that don't know to know. You mentioned you had some type of relationship with the athletic director as an offensive coordinator, during that time frame there at Rocky Mountain. How do you establish a relationship? What little nuggets would you give guys to be able to, shake his hand, let him know who you are, all those kind of things?
I think the biggest thing is go in and say hi.
Yeah.
Find something you have in common. And it's not just with the AD. It's get around. Go to a basketball game if you're a football coach. Walk around to professors. Walk around in the cafeteria. Get to know people, not just to look for the next job or say, man, if I do this, this is going to set me up, but invest in people.
Absolutely.
That's the biggest thing to me is just do a good job. Work hard. Put your head down. Do what's asked of you. But at smaller schools, you see the AD more. You're around him more. You may be working a basketball game that he needs help with, or you may be doing community service projects or things like that. So that was a big part of it. But just get to know the people you're working with or working for and enjoy it. Doesn't mean you got to be best friends with everybody,
yeah.
But be genuine. Be genuine of who you are. But get to know people. What's wrong? I don't think any AD would get upset if you walk by and, said, hey, I just wanted to say hi. How was your weekend? Things like that. Well, that sparks, communication and talking. And so I just think that's huge. I really love being around different type of people, different backgrounds, how they grew up, learning about kids, learning about coaches. But do the same thing with your athletic department.
Yeah. That's so crazy how tightly bound that is to your previous answer in regards to treat every university like it's the dream job and
yeah.
Get to know the people and you do those things hand in hand. Not that once again doesn't mean you're going to be the head coach. Doesn't automatically amount to that, but it automatically amounts to you doing a good job of where you're at, which is what's important. Now you've been the head ball coach there since 2018, December 2018, or January 2019, all the way up until now. Just what's been the growth like for you personally as a head ball coach as you continue to get better and better at that job every year?
Well, the first thing was my first year, I was a terrible head coach. I was bad. I thought I had every answer. You can prepare as much as you want for this job, or the next job, the higher up, whatever you want to call it. But there's a lot of stuff you're not going to know how to handle, what to do, the decision to make until you have to go through it. I'll tell you what, the best thing I had was at the 35 under 35, being able to ask those guest speakers, Coach, how do you handle this? Coach, how do you handle this situation? When do you know time to cut ties with a player? Just again, asking questions. I think people got tired of me, and those other 34 guys got tired of me in the room because I'm sitting there asking question after question because I may not be in front of those guys anymore.
Yeah.
But boy, they're in a good situation. They've been a head coach for a long time. I don't care the level.
Yeah.
And so that was the big thing for me was, and after that first year, kind of looking myself in the mirror and saying, okay, I may think this is the right way, but what is beneficial for our kids? What's beneficial for these other coaches? And there's stuff, I'll probably run into something tomorrow that, oh crap, I didn't prepare for that or have that. There's always, in the game of football is always changing, whether it's the portal now, whether it's scholarshiping, whether it's conference realignment, whatever it may be. And so I think you've got to be willing to adapt. I think you still have to have that fine line of what are my standards, what are my expectations, what are my non-negotiables, but also what am I okay with adapting on? And so every year it's been a little bit here and there of, okay, we got to do this better, or man, we need to relook at this, or 5 years ago, this is the way it was done.
Yeah.
And if we don't adapt, then we're going to die.
Yeah. Now, after doing this podcast for as long as we have, and I have a brother who's a high school head football coach here in Texas, I've kind of heard about sometimes that door closes in front of you inside of that room, and it's a very lonely place at times when you got to make these decisions and everybody's looking at you for the answer. Who do you lean on? Like, how do you mentioned the 35 under 35, which we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a sec, in regards to like being able to ask some questions and being able to develop professionally a little bit, but like, on a day-to-day basis, who's that rock that you're able to lean on?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's other coaches that are in the same situation. There's a couple coaches in conference here that I talk to a lot. There's Coach Glenn. There's different guys that I talk to. And I'll be honest with you, there's another sport here at Rocky. Their head coach has had a lot of success in another sport where I talk to him too. For me, the head coaching spot it can be lonely sometimes. You're making a decision that maybe your 10, 9, 11 other staff members are like, what in the world is this for?
Right.
Or, your kids in your locker room. So I think it's not having too many voices, right? But it's the guys that you can really rely on. And like I said, I go to another sport here quite a bit. Sure, we have our differences and things like that, but just to get a fresh perspective, or maybe he asks a question that like, man, I didn't even think about that because he's not in the football sense of it.
Yeah.
So I think having those 4 to 5 people that you can really lean on and talk to and just bounce things off of is huge.
Yeah. What's really cool about this is listening to the story. I know it's fast forward, and obviously this is, a long time worth of knowledge that you've been able to acquire over time. But it's really cool to see how close, as we're talking through this in real time, that conversation with Coach Glenn, he didn't have knee jerk reactions. It was about, just thinking things through and all that kind of stuff. And now we're here at your position. That's a lot of decision making. And, you don't have that opportunity to be around Coach Glenn. Maybe you're approaching this stuff differently, rightly, wrongly, differently, but it's different for sure. And it's just really cool how, it might be the most minute things, but these things continue to get passed from generation to generation. Awesome story, Coach. And, you mentioned that you're part of the 2020 35 under 35 class. Just really quick, I know you mentioned it a couple times here throughout the podcast, but just watch the guys apply. What did that program mean to you?
Number one, as a smaller level coach, it made me feel like to be a part of that, it didn't matter who you were, where you were in that room, that, hey, you were selected for a reason. I think it's huge because of not only the networking, but learning. Hearing James Franklin come in and talk, you see this guy on TV every single week, and to hear him talk about things, to hear other coaches and people at all levels, because again, you can have success. It doesn't matter the level. Sometimes we only, we focus on the biggest level, but there's a lot of great coaches at every single level. And so it was great for me to be in a room with guys that I'm looking at going, oh man, you're at Penn State, you're at Texas A&M, you're at North Dakota State. To really feel like, hey, I belong here. And so I think it's great to have the different representation from every level, from some high school guys to smaller college to big college to things that really resonated with me. I think everybody should apply because it's a great honor. I think it's one of the top honors in our coaching profession to be able to say you're a part of that. And so I had a great time, very thankful for it. I learned a ton, things that made me validate, like, okay, we are doing that. That is the right thing from, guys that maybe said they did it differently and they're successful with it now. But I think it was a huge honor, and to be able to, it's still on my Twitter. It's still on how I talk to people and things like that, because it's a big deal to me. And I was very honored to be a part of that. And I love going back and speaking every year at it, because anything that I can do to, again, it's giving back, right? That's what we are as coaches. It's giving back. It's about the next group of coaches. And so whatever we can do to help those guys or women to take the next step is huge.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I appreciate everything that you've done for us since you've been a part of that program, and your impact, at your program, it continues to be immense. And so before I let you go, I'd love for you to plug in that Twitter account. And, if coaches, your wealth of knowledge, if coaches got questions or you don't want to follow up on anything, they can shoot you a DM.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just at Coach_Stutz, STUTZ. And please, if there's, whether it's an email, a phone call, a text message, guys just want to know information or anything, I'll do whatever I can to help guys and just give them, my thoughts and opinions and my story and whatever I can do to help the next crop or the current crop or whatever it is. That's what it's about. We're coaches to help kids and young men and young women now and things like that. So whatever I can do to help.
All right, Coach, we appreciate you, man. And I'll see you soon, okay?
All right. Thank you.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.